When a book is banned, it's not just a story being silenced, it's a threat. But a threat to whom? To you or to those who hold the reins of power? Kings, churches, and governments have long feared the written word, burning pages, censoring ideas, and even silencing authors. Not because words can kill, but because they can set minds free. The right knowledge, in the right hands, has the power to dismantle empires, challenge dogma, and reveal truths that those in control would rather keep buried. History reveals a striking pattern. When authority fears an idea, it tries to destroy it. But here's the flaw in their logic. Ideas are fireproof. From the ashes of ancient Rome to the shadows of the Soviet Union, from the Inquisition to the Cold War, banned books have endured. Hidden, smuggled, and read in secret, they survive because they are more than mere literature. They are blueprints for understanding the world as it truly is, and tools for ensuring you're never just a pawn in someone else's game. The most interesting thing? Some of these books were banned by opposing regimes. Fascists and communists alike have censored Nietzsche. Monarchies and revolutionaries have banned Machiavelli. Authoritarian and democratic governments have burned Brave New World. If such different extremes have tried to hide the same books, perhaps the problem is not with them, but with those who don't want you to read them. But what about you? Will you follow the rules and ignore these works, or will you do exactly what they don't want you to do? Today we're going to delve into 6 books that have been censored, persecuted, and banned. Books that challenged religions, shook governments, and challenged everything that was believed to be true. The question isn't why they were banned. The question is, why haven't you read them yet? And to start this journey, there's no better place than the author who challenged the entire notion of good and evil, who exposed morality as a power game, and who was censored by opposing regimes because his ideas were dangerous to any system that tried to control people's minds. The time has come to talk about Friedrich. Friedrich was never a thinker who offered comfort. His philosophy is a constant challenge to everything that Western civilization has constructed as truth. Beyond Good and Evil and the Genealogy of Morals not only question traditional morality, but also reveal its hidden origins, submission and resentment. That is why his ideas were censored in regimes that claimed to be opposites, but that had something in common: the fear of individual freedom. The Soviet Union banned his works because they considered them a threat to the socialist ideal, while the Nazi regime tried to hijack and distort his concepts to justify the idea of racial superiority. Neither understood his true thought. The German philosopher did not belong to any political ideology, and above all, despised any form of collective indoctrination. For him, any system that imposed an absolute moral code was, in fact, stifling human greatness. His fiercest criticism was directed at Christian morality, which he saw as a morality of the weak, a code constructed by those who could not exercise direct power, so they created an ethic that glorified humility and sacrifice as virtues. Traditional virtues, in his view, arose not from a divine principle, but from an instinct for self-preservation of those who had no other means of domination. This thinking made him a danger to any regime based on blind obedience. Communism rejected him because his emphasis on the will to power was incompatible with the idea of collectivism. Fascism tried to hijack him, ignoring that he despised nationalism and any idea of state-imposed supremacy. Religion attacked him because he declared bluntly that God is dead, not as a simplistic atheist cry, but as a diagnosis of modernity. Man could no longer hide behind faith to justify his choices. His books were considered dangerous because they leave no room for illusions. If morality is a construct, it can be deconstructed. If there are no absolute truths, any belief system can collapse. He did not offer easy replacements for the values he attacked, and that is precisely what makes his work so disturbing. His thinking demands that the reader face reality without ideological crutches, that they question what they consider right and wrong, and above all, that they abandon the need for external validation in order to build their own strength. Why read Nietzsche? Because he teaches us to distrust everything we have been taught as immutable truth. His words are not a manual for living, but an invitation to abandon comfortable certainties and explore the unknown. His books are not dangerous because they dictate rules, but because they destroy them all. And if this deconstruction of morality was enough for governments and religions to try to erase his ideas, imagine the impact of a book that questions not only values, but the very right to govern. The next work on this list attacked not morality, but the legitimacy of kings. Thomas Paine's The Rights of Man did more than get censored. It ignited revolutions. Not every revolution begins with weapons. Some begin with words. Thomas Paine was not a general, but few men have had such an impact on political history. His books not only advocated freedom, but also taught how to achieve it. The Rights of Man was a direct attack on monarchy and aristocracy, and for this reason, it was censored, burned, and treated as an existential threat by the governments of the time. England banned the work for a clear reason. It did not merely criticize the power of kings, it denied it altogether. Paine argued that monarchy was a sham sustained by tradition and fear, and that true power should lie in the hands of the people. To him, no government had the right to exist without the consent of the governed. This may seem obvious today, but in the 18th century it was political heresy. To question the authority of kings was to question the natural order of the world. The impact of the book was immediate. Published in 1791 at the height of the French Revolution, it became a symbol of the fight against absolutism. Its author not only supported the revolution, he justified it. He argued that the people had not only the right, but the duty to overthrow oppressive governments. For the European monarchs, this kind of idea could not be tolerated. England declared Paine a traitor, and he had to flee to France to avoid arrest. But the irony of history spares no one. The same man who was persecuted by the monarchs for defending the revolution was almost guillotined by the revolutionaries themselves. His vision of freedom was incompatible with the political terror that followed in France, and he was arrested for disagreeing with the extremists who now ruled the country. If there is one thing that his fate proves, it is that power, whether monarchical or revolutionary, always fears those who cannot be controlled. What makes The Rights of Man an essential book? It is not only a defense of freedom, but a warning about how power is maintained through the manipulation of tradition, force, and the ignorance of those governed. Paine makes it clear that rights are not concessions made by governments. They are natural elements of human existence. He not only undermines the legitimacy of monarchy, but also warns of the risks of any system that does not have the people as sovereign. Reading this book today is not just a historical exercise. It is a reminder that no authority should be accepted without question. If the book was banned, it is because its teachings are dangerous for any regime that tries to impose its will without justification. And if an 18th century text is still seen as a threat by many governments around the world, perhaps its message is more current than it seems. But if Paine was banned for attacking monarchy, the next author on this list was censored for challenging something even more untouchable: the very idea of censorship. At a time when books were controlled by the state and the church, John Milton wrote a manifesto defending freedom of speech with such brutal clarity that his arguments still resonate centuries later. Now let's talk about Areopagitica. Few texts have challenged power as sharply as Areopagitica. In 1644, as England was torn apart by civil war, John Milton wrote one of the most influential manifestos in history against censorship. His target was not a specific government, but the very idea that a state should decide what people could and could not read. At the time, all books published in England had to be approved by the government. The justification was always the same: to protect the people from dangerous ideas. Milton dismantled this logic with a blunt statement: it is not books that should be judged before they are read, but readers who should learn to judge what they read. His argument was bold. He was not only defending the right to publish without permission, but also suggesting that truth does not need protection. For him, any idea that needs to be shielded from criticism is not strong enough to survive on its own. This notion made censorship not a mechanism for defending society, but a tool for controlling those who feared free thought. His arguments were dangerous for any regime that depended on ignorance to sustain itself. The book was met with hostility, and its publication had no immediate impact. But the ideas contained in it persisted. Centuries later, they served as the basis for the First Amendment of the United States Constitution and continue to be a reference whenever freedom of expression is threatened. The reason Areopagitica was attacked at the time is the same reason it continues to be debated today. Governments still claim that certain information should be controlled for the common good. Censorship never disappeared, it just changed its form. Reading this book is to understand that the battle against the control of ideas did not begin in the 20th century, nor did it end in the digital age. Whenever an authority tries to decide which voices can be heard, Milton's thinking continues to be an antidote. But while Milton denounced censorship, the next book on this list showed something even more disturbing: that control of society can be done without oppression, without tyrants, without explicit censorship, only with distraction and pleasure. Now we will talk about Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. If George Orwell warned us about a future of brutal repression, Aldous Huxley showed us something even more dangerous. A world where people do not need to be monitored because they do not want to resist. Brave New World was censored in several countries, not because it depicted a bloody dictatorship, but because it exposed an uncomfortable truth. Voluntary servitude is the most efficient form of control. The book describes a society where there is no war, no poverty, and everyone seems happy. But this happiness comes at a price. Critical thinking has been replaced by constant entertainment. Conflict has been eliminated with a perfect drug, soma, and any form of pain or questioning is quickly stifled. There is no explicit oppression because people do not need to be forced to obey. They want to obey. This makes Huxley's work an uncomfortable mirror. Unlike classic dystopias where there is a clear enemy to be fought, here the enemy is within the human being itself. There is no need for a thought police, as in 1984, because no one has thoughts that bother them. Censorship does not come from an authoritarian government, but from distraction and superficiality. This is exactly what made Brave New World considered dangerous. The book was banned in schools in the United States and banned in countries like Ireland because it addresses topics such as drugs, sex, and psychological manipulation. But the real reason for its censorship is not in these elements. It is in its central message. The novel suggests that when pleasure is excessive and constant, freedom ceases to be a desire. Huxley did not just write fiction about a distant future. He foresaw a pattern that can be seen in the present. A world where people do not read because they are too busy with digital distractions, where debate has been replaced by empty slogans, and where the promise of instant happiness is used as a tool of control. Reading Brave New World today is an exercise in deconstruction. It forces the reader to ask whether modern society truly values freedom or whether it prefers the illusion of security and comfort. The book's biggest warning is not about an oppressive government, but about the human capacity to indulge in pleasure until it completely loses interest in anything else. And if Huxley showed us how entertainment can be a method of control, the next author on this list revealed something even more disturbing: that the very concept of morality can be an illusion created to justify power. Now let's talk about Niccolò Machiavelli and The Prince. There's a reason why Machiavellian has become synonymous with coldness and manipulation. Few books have been as misunderstood as The Prince. It doesn't teach cruelty or encourage corruption. It simply describes power as it is, not as it should be. And it was precisely this brutal honesty that led to his work being censored, banned, and condemned as a manual for tyrants. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in the 16th century during a period of political chaos in Italy. Unlike traditional philosophical treatises that talked about ideal governments, he did the opposite. He analyzed how leaders actually acted to gain and maintain power. His conclusion was uncomfortable. Successful rulers do not follow conventional morality. They cannot be naive or guided by sentimentality. They need to be strategic, knowing when to act harshly and when to demonstrate virtues just for the sake of appearances. The Catholic Church banned the book, considering it a threat to the moral order. Monarchs and religious leaders condemned him because he exposed the inner workings of power, and few are willing to admit that government is sustained by manipulation. His name has become synonymous with wickedness, but what Machiavelli really did was expose the hypocrisy of the powerful. He did not create a model for cruel leadership. He simply showed that those who pretend to govern with kindness are often the most ruthless behind the scenes. The irony of the censorship of The Prince is that, despite its ban, its teachings were widely used. Napoleon studied his work. Dictators and statesmen read it closely. Modern CEOs and strategists apply his lessons because, in the end, politics is not about morality, it is about survival. But the question remains, why read Machiavelli? Because his book teaches us to identify the mechanisms of power and not to be naive in the face of them. He does not teach us to be immoral, but to understand that, in the game of influence, those who believe that kindness alone is enough are often the first to fall. And if Machiavelli taught us how politics works, the next author went even further. He challenged the very basis of religion. Now we will talk about David Hume and dialogues concerning natural religion. Questioning religion was once a death sentence. For centuries, dogmas were imposed not by the force of arguments, but by fear of being burned at the stake. In the midst of this scenario, David Hume dared to do something unthinkable, to rationally dismantle the foundations of faith. Dialogues Concerning Natural Religion was not just a book, it was a frontal attack on theological certainties. For this reason, it was censored, criticized, and kept from the public for years. Hume was neither a militant atheist nor a cheap provocateur. He simply asked the question that few dared to ask: can we prove the existence of God by reason alone? For the church, this question was dangerous. Traditional Christian thought held that the order of the universe was sufficient proof of the existence of a creator. The Scottish philosopher did not accept this answer without question. He argued that the fact that the world appears to be organized does not mean that it was intentionally designed. His dialogues featured different characters debating topics such as the argument for intelligent design and the nature of evil. Instead of imposing a vision, he dismantles certainties by showing how our beliefs are often based on habits and emotions, not pure logic. This approach made his work seen as a threat. Publication was delayed, and Hume avoided publishing it during his lifetime to avoid direct reprisals. What makes this book essential? It teaches that doubt is not a problem, it is a method. Hume does not ask the reader to reject faith, but to understand that belief, when imposed without question, loses its intellectual value. His work is not a direct attack on religion, but a call for intellectual honesty. And if the censorship against Hume proves that ideas can be dangerous to any institution that is based on blind acceptance, the most uncomfortable truth of all is that no ban was enough to prevent these books from shaping history.